Development Agency of October 23rd, 2007. Please stand for the pledge and the invocation.
Bow your heads. Lord, please give us the wisdom and knowledge to make the right decisions for the city of Newman. Please keep your hand and keep our firefighters safe in Southern California as they fight the terrible fires. And one last thing, please keep your hand on my mom who's recuperating Los Angeles. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Ed. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Caton?
Present.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Frequell?
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Martinez?
Present.
Mayor Pansy?
Present. Item 5, declarations of conflicts of interest.
I'll have one, Mayor, on item 10G, that same class.
Okay. Item 6, ceremonial matters. We have none this evening. Item 7, items from the public, non-agenda items. If anybody has anything they'd like to bring before us that is not on tonight's posted agenda, now would be the opportunity. See no one. Item 8, consent calendar. Item 8, waive all readings of ordinances and resolutions set by title. B, approval of warrants. And item C, approval of minutes of the October 9th, 2007 regular meeting.
I move for approval of the consent calendar.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. We have no public hearings this evening. Regular business. When an item comes before us under regular business and you'd like to comment, please raise your hand and be recognized, and try to keep your comments to under 3 minutes. Our first item under regular business is Stancog presentation, 2008 Public Participation Plan, Safety Lou Revision, presented by Carlos Yamzan. Carlos?
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the Newman City Council. Carlos Yamzan, Senior Planner, Stanislaus Council of Governments. This isn't a presentation per se, but just really to make myself available to the council. You have the document as a pre-read. The current document was adopted in 2004 as part of the 1991 federal reauthorization for transportation monies. The current reauthorization, Safety Lou, which is actually I have to read it myself. Safe, Accountable, Flexible, and Efficient Transportation Equity Act, a legacy for users. Safety Law requires an update of the current public participation plan. What this really is an extended outreach of our plan to make our transportation planning process more accessible. The 4 bullets actually included in your report really highlight the essence of the document: to strive for a balanced representation for all stakeholders in the planning process, to educate local officials and the citizens of Stanislaus County, to be proactive and responsive to the community. With that, I can share that the comments that we've received so far in the rounds I've made with the City Council really focus on the update of the stakeholders list. That has been the extent of the comments, and with that, I'll take any comments from the council or any questions.
I'm sorry, Carlos. Oh, the city manager interrupted me. I apologize for that. Any questions or for Carlos? Make sure everybody reads that plan. And Carlos, thank you very much.
With that, Mr. Mayor and Council, with your permission, I'll excuse myself from the rest of the council meeting. I will leave a set of cards. Please feel free to contact me regarding this document or any other matters.
Thank you very much, Carlos,
Thank you.
for coming tonight. We had a few latecomers that under non-agenda items. Would anybody like to comment under a non-agenda item, something that's not on today's evening's posted agenda?
Good evening, council members. My name is Sydney Allister, I live at 1128 Q Street. My partner Larry Bedford and I own Mr. B's Main Street Bakery. And I would like to, well, I'd also like to tell you that I have been a city planner, and I've also been a manager of the Economic Development and Redevelopment Agency for the city of Turlock. And I only say that so that I can tell you that I've been involved in the review of many, many, many projects at staff level and at management level to determine whether a project was a good fit for the community. The project then went through your planning commission and then to the final review by the city council. The review process gives the opportunity to bring forth all of the issues and concerns of the community and how those concerns can be mitigated. It also gives the community a chance to preview whether the developer will be a good steward of the land, of the environment, and of their neighbors and surrounding areas. The only way to assure that we are part of the discussion is to be part of the process. And I'm speaking of the reuse of Croach Landing Naval Base. What I expect from my city council is to be part of the discussion and therefore part of the process. And I ask that you respect the process and let it go forward, whether you support the project or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. We actually had this later on in the agenda, but that's fine. Okay. I guess item B, C, and D, Michael, is
Yeah, item
all
B,
in
C,
one
and D
deal?
can be combined into
Okay.
one presentation.
We have a presentation this evening by Ecologic on our water system master plan, our wastewater treatment and disposal master plan, and our wastewater collection system master plan by Ecologic.
Mayor, tonight we have Miss Tiffany Knapp from Ecologic, who has been working with the city of Newman probably for the last 2 years. Generally, we see Dr. Stoll. He does a lot of the treatment of wastewater and the actual process of treating the wastewater. Ms. Knapp, her specialty is, again, doing the master plan process. So she's overseeing each of those master plans for us. And we have three. One's a water master plan. One's a wastewater collection, which is, and then the wastewater treatment, which we are treating separately at this point in time. So, but she's going to combine these into one presentation.
Good evening. As Michael said, my name is Tiffany Knapp, and I'm with Ecologic Engineering. And I apologize that Dr. Stoll is not here. I know that he is very animated and very entertaining to listen to, so I apologize. I will probably not be quite as entertaining, but I will do my best to not bore you and put you to sleep. I'm happy to see that I actually have 3 agenda items, because trying to summarize and give you an update on 3 master plans at the same time is quite difficult to do in a short period of time. So council members, you almost have a book sitting in front of you to follow along with. I apologize for that, but I'll try to go through it pretty quickly here. And there are some pictures in there, so those kind of fast. But basically, as Michael said, I'm going to give an overview tonight on the 3 master plans that we're working on currently. And I'm going to start with a little bit of a background, just to kind of jog your memories about why we're doing this, where we started from. I'll talk about each of the master plans, plant some seeds, kind of give a summary of the update of where we are and where we have to go, and then mostly talk about where we have to go in the last part and the next steps. So some general background. The water, wastewater, and collection system master plans are all very linked together, as you're probably aware. The wastewater, the disposal of the wastewater is controlled a lot of times all the way back to the water. And as you guys, again, are probably very well aware, part of the reason we're doing some of these master plans goes back to how we dispose of and reclaim the wastewater here. The master plans are also to develop a roadmap for the future expansion of the city. They follow along with the general plan that was approved earlier this year, and they link all those pieces together. So where do we start from? Again, to kind of jog your memories, it's been a little while since Rich or myself or anyone else was here from Newman, other than the exciting news from last week. A lot of this goes back to the regulatory compliance. It goes back to the potential degradation, groundwater degradation at the treatment plant. And what the Regional Board, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, is most concerned with there is salinity, nitrogen, pathogens, and metals, particularly iron, manganese, and arsenic. For the nitrogen and the pathogens, we're not very concerned at this site that this is going to be an issue. But for the salinity, obviously, it's a major issue. And that's why we're looking to actually change the potable water supply to a surface water source, which is much lower in salinity than the groundwater source that you currently use. We have talked with the Regional Board about this. We've gotten buy-in on this compliance strategy. We have gone through a process with them to make sure that they really are on board with us going this direction, spending the money, the city spending the money to actually look at the water supply side of things, while still taking care of the wastewater side of things, but really focus the efforts on changing that water source in order to improve the water quality of both the drinking water and then also the wastewater. And we've also had them buy into the concept of an indicator monitoring well for the treatment ponds. For the treatment ponds, we're most concerned about those metals, just the way the treatment ponds are constructed. They create a redox condition underneath the ponds, which tends to create conditions where iron, manganese, arsenic can leach out into the groundwater. I'm not saying it's necessarily happening, but we're going to put one well out at the treatment plant to give an indicator of whether or not there may be an issue there. And again, the Regional Board has bought into, okay, this is a good way to look at this initially and see if there even is an issue to begin with. So we've also done a wastewater capacity analysis for you, which addressed the above issues I just talked about, as well as the storage basin, which was designed this summer and will go out to bid in February and be constructed next year. And that's making sure that there's enough storage capacity for the treatment plant. And then it also addressed the organic load issues, which you've probably heard, if you remember back, probably wanted to erase those visions of wastewater organic load and what that is. But there is some unique organic loading at this treatment plant that we weren't able to describe. And so we've looked further into that issue. So I'm going to start with the Water Master Plan and talk about, and begin with, why are we doing this? Once again, a lot of this turns back to compliance, so looking for a higher quality potable water, as well as making sure there's sufficient water for city growth. So in addition to having the higher potable water, there is a lot of news recently, you've probably heard in the state as well as around the country, with making sure there's sufficient water supply for communities, for cities. There is a real interest at the state level of making sure that if you have a surface water potable water source, you actually have a backup source, which in this case, it fits really perfectly to, even though we're shifting towards a surface water potable water source, we keep the wells so that during periods of drought, you could still use the wells. And in periods of drought, the Regional Board would look at that as a severe condition and allow the use of the wells even though they have a higher salinity. And then in everything we're doing, of course, we're looking at the existing residents just paying for their share of what is built, what is constructed. So the existing residents pay the existing residents' needs, and the new residents then pay for any new facilities or for their share of the facilities that currently exist. So what have we done so far? This is what you're dying to hear, right? We have completed a draft of the existing system. We've looked at the land uses and projected water demands, we've looked at the current water usage and then projected, again, based on the general plan, looking to make sure that we can fulfill what the growth has been projected for the city's general plan. We've looked at an initial development of water supply and distribution system alternatives and an initial development of the implementation plan. And this is really the key of looking at this water master plan. We know where we want to go. We want to make sure we have a better quality potable water supply, but how do we implement that while taking into consideration the financial issues involved with completely changing the water source? So in doing so, there's a couple things kind of on an interim basis. First of all, looking at putting in additional wells. It looks like we're nearing the capacity of the existing wells. So in the interim, until a surface water supply is actually in place and a new treatment plant's in place, providing interim capacity with additional wells, and also storage and booster pump stations that help accommodate the peak flow so that we actually we limit the amount of new wells that are actually needed. And then, as I mentioned, this alternative implementation plans, which is subject to the next slide. And this is really where we're looking at whether or not we can design a treatment plant, in this case, a water treatment plant. Normally, water treatment plants are designed around a maximum day demand. You have different water uses throughout the day. In the morning, everyone gets up, takes a shower, makes breakfast. You have a lot of water demand. Then in the middle of the day, it may drop off a little bit. In the evening, everyone's making dinner, you have a higher water demand again. So treatment plants have to be able to handle that highest maximum day water demand. Well, building a treatment plant to handle that maximum day, which may be quite a bit more than just an average day, what you average uses over the entire day, building a treatment plant for that size is much more expensive than building one just to handle average day. So on one end, we're going to make sure that we bracket the just looking at accommodating the average day within using the wells for the peaking, which makes the initial cost up front less. And then we need to look at kind of the extreme on the other end of looking at actually being able to supply the maximum day, which is if we need to make sure we have that higher quality potable water to fully comply with the wastewater compliance issue. So this is something that's still in the works. We're still working out the details of how much water needs to be supplied from the surface water source in order to fit in with the compliance on the wastewater side. The other thing that we're working with your city staff in developing all this is gauging what is realistic growth. There is a growth projection in the general plan. That growth projection may be a little too aggressive. And so we're working with Michael, with Ernie, to make sure that our growth projections are realistic, that we're not saying you need to have a treatment plant online in 2010 just because the general plan said in 2010 you're supposed to have, I don't know what it is, but say 15,000 people, when you know that there's no way you're going to have that number if that's the case. And then we also, in doing this, need to make sure we're identifying future facilities that they need to, because of the economies of scale, be oversized to begin with. Things like pipelines and pump stations, and then the actual property itself for a water treatment plant. But as we're doing that, we want to make sure that we're distributing the costs appropriately for the existing users and the new users. So that's the quick summary of the water master plan. We'll move on to the wastewater treatment plant master plan. So once again, why are we doing this? It goes back to groundwater degradation issues and making sure we're in compliance with the Regional Water Quality Control Board's requirements. We also want to make sure there's sufficient treatment capacity for the existing residents out there, and also make sure that there's sufficient treatment, storage, and disposal for future growth. And in that, making sure that the costs are allocated appropriately. So once again, the existing residents paying for existing needs. If there's upgrades that are needed for compliance issues, the existing residents would have to take care of that for their existing system. But then if there's upgrades that are needed or expansion that's actually needed for new residents, that would be taken on by the new residents, the new users. So what have we done thus far? We have submitted a work plan for the monitoring well. We talked about getting the buy-in from the regional board on that monitoring well, that indicator well, to see if the pond treatment system is a go for the future, if we can keep going that route of treatment versus a more mechanical, less space intensive, but definitely much more energy intensive and normally more expensive treatment plant to build when we start looking towards the future. And that work plan has been approved by the regional board, and we should be installing that well within the next month or two here. We've also looked at flow generation for the wastewater. So that's coupled with the water. We've connected those two. You have a certain water demand, we also have a certain wastewater generated both now and what we project it to be in the future. And then we've looked at what the future storage and disposal requirements would be using an extensive water balance with great input from Dr. Stoll himself in this regard. He is a water balance expert, and believe me, he has looked at every single minute iteration of it. You have the most complete water balance in the entire state of California, I guarantee it. Sometimes, maybe even too much sometimes, I think. But we have really looked at, there's some interesting, I won't go into the details of the interesting flow characteristics, but just the way that flows come in and the way they're distributed throughout the year are kind of unique in this city. And so putting together a very typical water balance, we had to get a little more creative and really look at a great detail. So we've also just recently finished looking at, or I won't even say completely finished, but at least have some initial conclusions with the organic loading analysis. And I'll mention this now, I'll mention it again. This really affects the future treatment. Treatment facilities are designed around this BOD, organic loading value, and if we have to assume something much higher than what is actually there, it's going to significantly affect the size of the facilities, which then affects the cost of the facilities. So these last two items I'm going to talk about a little bit more in detail. Just to kind of remind you, I don't know how many of you take daily trips out to your wastewater treatment plant, but this is an image of the treatment plant. Up here is Hills Ferries Road, and then the main entrance to the plant is right here with the main office area right about there. Wastewater comes in through a trunk line down at the bottom here into a headworks located about here, and then through 3 treatment ponds where it's treated biologically. The organics are broken down and treated that way. And then it flows into this existing storage basin, and then I put in the new storage basin, which will be located right here. And then the water, the treated water then is then disposed of on irrigation land. Mostly alfalfa is grown, and then some overland flow fields here, which are basically, to the average viewer, would be look like grasslands areas that are sprinkled. So that's how the water is treated and disposed. When we start looking towards the future, one of the drawbacks potentially for this type of treatment system or this type of disposal system is that it's very land intensive. This here will treat about 1.5 million gallons per day. So when we start looking towards projecting towards more like 5 MGD at general plan build out, how much land is that going to take up? So this image shows you how much land is needed at what's identified in the general plan as the primary sphere of influence, and from the general plan that would be development out to about 2016. And again, that may be adjusted the actual year based on what is actually realistic. But this is the additional land that would be needed to store and dispose of the wastewater out to that primary sphere of influence. And one thing, as you're looking at this, and especially since I see lots of community members in the audience here, don't identify the actual parcels. I'm trying to show you areas, how much land area you need. Don't look and say that my farm is underneath there and start getting excited. But this is to show you general land areas. There's a lot of things I'll talk about in a couple slides here that we need to look at about whether or not those land areas are appropriate. But you can see maybe half again, a little more than half again, as much land area as we currently have for the treatment plant. And then if we look at full build out of the city limits, the full build out of the secondary SOI, we're looking at all that land down there. It's about 925 acres, additional acres beyond what is currently part of the treatment plant itself. Again, not looking at specific areas, but kind of visualizing how much acreage that it takes to dispose of that much wastewater. As I mentioned, there's some considerations that we need to make sure we're looking at as we're looking at disposal land, and agricultural disposal land is what we call this, because it's an agricultural practice. We're actually growing crops on this land. And many of these things, soil type, the underlying groundwater level, the underlying groundwater salinity, obviously a major issue here, so we want to make sure that we're still being consistent with what we're doing at the main treatment plant. We need to look at parcel sizes, the ownership, whether it's private or corporate. There's a tendency not to try to take over private land if it can be helped. Also the distance from the treatment plant. I've just shown areas that are right next to the treatment plant, but we could go on the other side of town. There could be other areas. It just, then you have to transport the water. You have to convey the water to those areas. And then obviously the cost of the land as well. So it kind of, I said that I'd plant some seeds, plant some ideas. One of the things when we start looking at larger areas of land to reclaim the water agriculturally, a lot of cities start looking at actually being able to reclaim at least a portion of that water on urban landscaping, on parks or on landscaping within the city limits itself. So that's something to kind of keep in mind, or something to look at as one of the options when we're looking at the range of options available. So the other exciting thing is this whole Bod looking thing, the BOD analysis. These numbers that are up here are from a presentation that Dr. Stoll gave back a little while ago, and described this unaccounted for BOD that we're concerned about. If we look at on an annual average basis, the current total load into the treatment plant is almost 9,000 pounds per day of this mysterious BOD thing. F&A Dairy, which has a high organic waste, given the processing that they do there, is about a little over 5,000 pounds per day. And then we'd expect about 10,000 people, which is about the population of Newman currently, to produce around 1,800 pounds per day. Well, if we add up 5,200 plus 1,800, we still have 1,900 pounds per day that we don't know where it's coming from. So we we looked into this a little bit further, and as I mentioned before, this really has implications, and I'll probably mention it again because it is such an important thing for the future treatment. It affects the size of the treatment facilities and cost. So if we're looking at what we did a quick little sampling on 2 different sample dates and did 4 different sampling locations. One at F&A Dairy to just double check what we're measuring there. We took a sample at a city manhole that doesn't have F&A Dairy flowing into it. So what is just a typical residential wastewater. And then we combined those 2 samples in the proportion that flow proportionally they're combined in for the total flow into the treatment plant. And then compared that to the actual wastewater treatment plant, BOD. And we ran 4 tests on them. 2 biochemical oxygen demand tests, a 5-day and a 20-day, a chemical oxygen demand, and a total organic carbon. And now I'm probably starting to talk in mumble jumble and I'm not quite sure what I'm meaning. So in one slide, I'm going to try to explain what BOD 5, BOD 20, and COD is. Basically, they're all measures of organics, but they describe differently what type of organics are there. BOD, biochemical oxygen demand, is biologically available organics in a wastewater or in any water for that matter. BOD 5 is, well, BOD itself is represented by this curve, and BOD 5 is on this lower end of the curve. It's readily biodegradable organics, so it's stuff that's going to be eaten up by the microbes pretty quickly. BOD 20 is actually out here. It's a lot of times called ultimate BOD. It's what's going to be eaten up at a far extreme after it's been sitting around for 20 days or more. And then COD is a measure of organics up here, but it's all the organic demand, not just what's taken up by microbes. So it's another measure of that. And basically, we wanted to look at all of those things. And the reason I bring this up is that a lot of the organics we're seeing are actually farther out on the curve, whereas treatment plants and what you normally see from municipal wastewater and kind of what we always talk about in the industry is BOD 5. So we're always thinking down in this lower end of the curve, and that's typically what we design around. When we start explaining it and find out that it's further out on the curve, it explains a lot of things, and it also changes the way we might look at what type of treatment we use or how we treat the wastewater. So we have some preliminary conclusions. There's actually 2 slides of preliminary conclusions, which is very exciting for us. Again, Dr. Stoll went a little crazy on being very excited about the results here, and I'm sure he's pondering them right now as we speak. But one of the things that we determined is that the F&A discharge is very variable. The results that we got on 2 separate days, not really that far apart, very, very different. So we need to do something called flow proportional deposit sampling. We need to make sure we're taking samples in relation to the flow that's coming out of there to really characterize what kind of organic loading is coming from the treatment or from F&A. We also found out that the F&A waste does not appear to be readily biodegradable, so it's out way further on the curve rather than being really easy for the microbes to eat up. And we also found that the F&A BOD 5 results are probably low at times, and some of the things we were throwing around for reasons why that might be is disinfectants used at F&A, which is great. They're processing a food product. We want them to use disinfectants on their machinery and that kind of thing. Or possibly inadequate seed in the BOD test itself, which is just the way the BOD test is run. You actually use a microbe to seed the test itself. And so if they're expecting a typical wastewater strength and there's actually something much higher, they're not seeding in the lab the bacteria correctly in order to get an accurate result. The other exciting thing that's probably happening, exciting if you're a wastewater engineer that is that the city's waste and F&A's, can you tell I'm excited about this? Not quite as excited as the professor, but the waste seem to be acting synergistically as they combine in the sewers. So what we would expect, we'd combine the wastewater, as I said, we took a sample and we combined what we took at F&A and what we took at a manhole, and we combined them, and we kind of got about what we'd expect, but then that didn't compare directly to what we got at the treatment plant. So what's going on there? There's something actually happening in the sewers themselves. And so this kind of biodegradation that may or may not be occurring, or the way it's occurring in the sewers, would affect a mechanical plant a lot more than the pond system. The pond system is very forgiving because it has a really long time that it treats the wastewater. So, because we're all very excited, right? You're enthralled with this BOD thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course. The mystery BOD may be a result of those transformations taking place. It also may be that there's actually organics attaching to the sewers, and then there are certain microbes. I said that non-readily biodegradable organics, the stuff that's out there, the BOD20, bugs, it takes them a long time to eat it. Bugs being microbes, little organisms, not like bugs scurrying around on the floor bugs. It's our technical term for them in the engineering speak. The microbes, there are microbes that actually will eat non-readily biodegradable, so the stuff that doesn't like to biodegrade, and then what they produce is readily biodegradable. So what's non-biodegradable attaches to the sewers, it's eaten by these certain bugs, they produce a readily biodegradable waste that then ends up at the treatment plant, and so that's why we measure it being a lot higher at the treatment plant. So basically, in all that excitement, we're finding out that BOD5, in this case, is not a good indicator of the organic demand at the treatment plant, and we really need to begin sampling this BOD20 or COD, which we can relate back to BOD20 a lot better, and start getting a better baseline for what the actual strength of the wastewater is, and that then we can define what kind of treatment we need at the treatment plant a lot better. So that's your exciting wastewater lesson for the day. I know you always need one wastewater lesson every day, right? Now we're going to talk a little more about the collection system, which of course is very essential to conveying that wastewater down to the treatment plant. We want to look at, why are we doing this again? Going back to that concept, we want to look at the capacity that's available for the existing residents at a design storm. And you'll see those words design storm a lot on this slide. Both the state and their requirements and just kind of general practice now is to make sure that you're designing your sewers to accommodate a reasonable design storm, which would be a certain level of protection that the city can provide. So we want to make sure there's enough capacity available for the existing residents. We want to make sure that the system can, we want to see if the system can accommodate future users and how much. And then also, when we do this analysis, we can partially assess the condition of the sewers. We're not going down there and actually looking at them, so it's not a direct look at what condition the sewers are in, but we can kind of tell if there's a lot of leakage, well maybe there's some pipes that are damaged or some areas that really need to have more attention paid to them. And then finally, one of the big things, and touch on this a little later on, and it's actually one of your, whatever is after me, agenda items, the approval of the sewer system management plan. This collection system master plan not only helps with looking at the future and making sure that the facilities are in place, but it also fulfills one of the requirements of the sewer system management plan that is required by the state now through a statewide waste discharge requirement. So also in going back to the general mantra of who pays for what, existing residents would still be responsible for paying for their system if there's repairs and maintenance, or potentially minor upsizing that maybe the sewer wasn't originally designed quite big enough. But any major upsizing needed to accommodate new residents would be paid for by new growth, and any other conveyance, maybe not going through the existing sewers, would need to be paid for by new growth. So what have we done so far? This one's a fun one because we get to use the computers and model stuff. We've started with developing a GIS database, and we had, there was someone who came down from our offices, John Walker, to describe a little bit what the GIS is. It's a geographic information system. It's being used by not only cities, but multiple industries to really be able to map out with attributes systems, whether it be a collection system, whether it be our environmental people who go look at where there are Swanson's hawks and pink salamanders and all those other things. They use it to graph out what areas might have those animals living there, what plants might be living there. So it's used for many different things, but in our case, we really use it to look at the collection system itself. So we've developed a database, actually numbered the manholes so they're a little easier to identify when you're looking at it on a sheet of paper, and we want to go tell Ernie, hey, we go look at this manhole. He can look it up if we're not quite sure what street it's on or that kind of thing. We've also done flow monitoring, which is essential for the model calibration, and it also is where we determine what kind of leakage there is into the system. And we call it I&I, inflow and infiltration. And then we've done a land use analysis. We've developed the diurnal flow patterns, the current and future wastewater generation values, just like we did for the wastewater master plan and just like we did for the water demand side of things, and also determine what kind of peak flows, because those are key for seeing if the sewers will convey the flows that need to go through it. We also determined the design storm. The design storm isn't dictated by any entity. It's determined by the city, or sometimes counties determine what an appropriate design storm is. So we've looked at a couple different design storms and found one, talked with the city staff to figure out one that works well for the community, is protective of the community, and is appropriate for what we're looking for here. We also developed this model, and I'll show you a couple images in a second, and calibrated it, and are starting to really look at where there may or may not be issues. We've also done an SSMP, that's that requirement from the state. The SSMP needs assessment, I'll show you a list in a second of the different requirements and where there are still needs to fulfill those requirements. And then the item that's going to come before you in a little bit is the development plan and schedule. And that's one of the first items that's due as part of the SSMP requirements. So we've helped develop that plan and schedule. So to show you some exciting pictures, this is the GIS database of the collection system. Those council members, it's probably a little easier for you guys to look in your packets, but for everyone else who's looking out here, you can kind of, if you blur your eyes, see the colors. The colors represent different size pipes, so this is something that this shows. And it looks like it's just a map. So for instance, we look at the pipes. We can also look at the land uses that are designated, and the pipes are still kind of on there, a little harder to see, but those are all the different land uses for the city. So that's how we help determine what kind of land use, thus what kind of flow is going into those different pipes. And then this is actually a screenshot from the GIS database. It's more than just a map. It actually has, if we click on any one of those pipes, we can pull up the information about what size pipe it is, what the inverts are upstream and downstream, what it's made out of, if it's a gravity or if it's force main, or lots of other really exciting engineering things. But this is one of the tools that really makes it helpful, that it's more than just a map that you look at. It actually has information attached to each of the little items within it. Again, whether it's land use, you could pull up what the projected population is, or the density, or those kind of things. So the next image, although it looks similar, is actually an image from the model itself. We take the information from the GIS and the pipelines and that kind of thing, we put it into the model. So the image that's kind of below the top image there is the sewer system itself, what we're modeling, and the red line is the line that is then blown up in that little area here. This is this line down here in profile. So this is the ground surface. This is the pipe itself, and then this is the wastewater flowing in the pipe. And this is, although this is just a quick capture, this is actually a dynamic process. When we watch it, we can watch the water going up and down in the pipe itself. And this is just an average flow condition that we see in that actual line right there. The next image is that same line at the design storm that we're simulating. So at the design storm, we're showing that the pipe is pretty full here. It's actually going a little bit out of the pipe in some areas. So this pipe is pretty much at capacity in a design storm condition. So we take that, we can then look at our different pipelines. We can look and see if there's areas where we can put additional flow. We can look at building out the city limits. We can look at building out the general plan and see where there may or may not be capacity issues, or what we have to do with certain areas of the city. So some initial conclusions. We have figured out that this system here in Newman has relatively low I&I, this infiltration inflow. There's still some, there's always some in any collection system, but compared to a lot of communities that we see where they're having overflows, they're having spills, they're having major issues, and I think that's been the experience with earning public works, that you don't see major I&I issues here, which is great. That means that overall you're doing pretty well in that area. And again, a lot of communities we deal with are not having that kind of response. They're actually having to deal directly with sanitary sewer overflows. We've picked a 10-year, 6-hour design storm, which is very typical of a community this size, and also of a lot of communities in the general area. We've also determined that there appears to be sufficient capacity for build-out, with maybe some minor upgrades to some pipes that may need to be a little bit bigger, but in general it seems like for build-out of the city limits, there's enough capacity in the existing system. But for beyond the city limits, it's likely that we'll need to build additional trunk sewers. But that's kind of where the analysis is. We're looking if we can get more capacity out of certain areas of the city. So I touched on this SSMP thing. This is a requirement by the state board. They passed this about well, a couple years ago. It's a general discharge requirement applied to every community in the state. There's different deadlines based on the size of the community. For the size of Newman, which is falls into the 10,000 to I think 100,000 population category, there's certain deadlines for each of the components. So these are all the things that are required here. And on November 2nd, which is coming up here pretty soon, are the first three items, which is the development plan and schedule, which I believe all of you have seen a copy of, the goals, and then the organization, which is kind of the organizational chart of the city and how spills, if they happen, how they're responded to and that kind of thing. Those are completed. Then there's all these other items which are in progress at some level. We've done an analysis to see how far along they are, and we're working then with Ernie, figuring out what still needs to be done and where we are. The major thing to point out here is the system capacity and assurance plan. The master plan fulfills that requirement. So again, you're getting both the look at what do we need to do as far as capacity and future growth and all those things, providing adequate facilities for the residents, but also you're fulfilling one of the requirements. And it's great to have this done now, even though you see the deadline looks like it's far away. But as I mentioned, we had to have flow monitoring data, and a lot of communities, if they're not getting in step soon enough, they're going to be pressed to get this done in enough time just because of the time frame that it takes to do it, doing flow monitoring data during the winter and then doing the analysis on it. So I believe you'll touch on this in a minute, but it is that development plan and schedule that you're going to be asked to approve later on tonight. That is one of the requirements of the WDRs, the waste discharge requirements, is that the governing body, in this case the council, approves that document. And from what I can tell, the reasoning for this is they want to make sure that the city is aware that this is going on, that these things are required, that the state hasn't implemented these requirements for the communities. And so they require you to acknowledge that the development plan and schedule is out there, and then at the very end, down the final SS&P implementation, they'll ask you to approve the final document as well, which will include all the components. All right, so that's the exciting summary of where we are and what we've been doing. What's next? What are we finishing up here? On the water master plan side of things, we're still developing and refining the water supply and distribution alternatives. As I said, we're trying to look at how we can optimize the financial considerations while still providing the quality of water that's needed, and making sure that those costs are distributed appropriately. On the wastewater side of things, we'd still like to explore that exciting BOD more and make sure that we have a firm hold on what's going on with that. Potentially look at pretreatment of the higher strength wastewater, or look at how we can optimize the treatment on the wastewater side of things with the higher BOD. We also want to look at the future storage and disposal. We were looking at it. We know what the requirements are now, but how do we deal with that? Whether it's urban reclamation or which, as I mentioned, we need to look at what the soil characteristics are, what the underlying groundwater is for those areas, and where the areas might be appropriate for agricultural reuse. And then obviously to determine that distribution of costs between existing and new users. And as I mentioned, both the water and the wastewater master plans are intended to provide a range of options. The water master plan, again, how much surface water do we need, how big of a treatment plant do we need for the water treatment plant. And then on the wastewater side of things, we're going to provide the side of, okay, the ponds are doing great, we've done some sampling from our monitoring well, there's no problems with the groundwater, we can keep building ponds. Or maybe there are some issues, and we don't know it yet. What would the other extreme be, so that you are prepared to go this route if things are looking good, or if not, you know what the other option is, you know what other direction you might have to go. And that would probably be conversion to a more mechanical type of treatment. For the collection system, I kind of mentioned this when I was talking about the collection system, but we need to optimize the ability of the system to handle the design flows for development within the city limits. Again, just kind of make sure that there is capacity available, and see how much capacity we can get through the existing system, and then determine what the trunk sewer needs may be for the future development, how big do those sewers need to be, and potentially where they would be routed in a general sense. And with that, if you haven't fallen asleep, because I realize I'm not quite as exciting as Rich, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'm working on it. I got a couple of years to go, I think.
You did a fine job. You did a fine job.
Tiffany, just so I understand, the unaccounted for BOD 5, the 1,900 pounds a day, which increases the salinity. Is that correct? Is that what
The BOD is actually separate from the salinity. There may be some overlap, but the BOD is organics.
Okay.
So it's stuff that microbes can eat, whereas salinity is the salts, is the actual mineral component of the wastewater.
It seems like 1,900 pounds a day. Even with all the microorganisms, I know it's exciting stuff for you, but I'm just trying to.
It's a lot to digest.
Yeah. No pun intended.
No pun.
To produce that much a day, it just seems like it's just so much that the little microorganisms on a daily basis can produce 1,900 pounds.
That BOD is being produced somewhere. So it's kind of how it's actually showing itself. One of the things that could be happening, that's just an annual average, so it's kind of a general picture of things. One of the things that could be happening is that during colder conditions, the organics are attaching themselves to the sewer walls, and during colder conditions, it's kind of like us when we're cold, we just kind of want to curl up and do nothing. Microorganisms are actually kind of like that. We don't try to personify them too much, really. But they don't really like to eat much. They kind of just go into hibernation a little bit. But then during warmer weather, they'll really start producing. So we may be getting some attachment to the walls, and then when they get really excited, it gets warm, they're actually they're eating the non-biodegradable organics and producing more readily biodegradable organics during that time.
Is this an issue that's unique to us as a city, or other cities kind of go through the same?
I think we were seeing some uniqueness in the fact that we couldn't quite quantify it to begin with. Now we're starting to get a better picture where it's coming from. As far as completely unique to the city, no. There's other cities that have a high industrial load coming from a certain industry or process, or something that's explainable. It just, in other cities, we've seen it express itself a little more discreetly and specifically. So having a high BOD, that's not unique to the city. The way it's expressing itself, that was unique and something we had to kind of work ourselves through.
Thank you.
Further questions?
Tiffany, I have one question for you. The regional board, you said we have a buy-in. Is that written or is that verbal? You know, sometimes some of these verbal things change as time goes on, so.
We have a written buy-in. We've submitted an extensive letter that describes the compliance strategy, and they have in writing acknowledged that strategy. And then we've also submitted a schedule for how that's going to work, and they've acknowledged that as well.
So they won't change somebody's position and go back to
Well, I
square
can't
one.
promise that, but they shouldn't. They have it. They do have it in writing. Yeah.
Further
Yeah,
questions?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Bob. I had one question, because we want to stay with BOD because it's so exciting.
See, it is.
We're concerned about this 1,900, and of course, I guess we have a sampling plan as far as taking samples. If we increase the frequency of the sampling plans, could we possibly identify where that?
Yeah, and that's something we'd like to do. We'd like to increase the frequency, and then also, we normally are typically, and this is typical for most communities, only sample BOD 5 because that's what's typical. We'd like to start sampling these other constituents so that we get that clearer picture. So more often, and then also these other components of it.
Thank you.
Questions? That's it.
Michael looks like he's ready.
We have not identified our primary source for surface water yet. We have engaged Central California Irrigation District on a preliminary basis so far.
I'm Roy Mandel. I'm a resident here in Newman. Basically, worked on clean water programs out of the city of San Francisco for about 12 years. I've seen basically overflow across sewage that basically will basically, I think in the last 2 years, have cleaned up those focusing online in the sewer system. I said that to say this since I've been here a year and a half now. I have water at the office here from time to time. And I said to say this is what are you all doing in reference to, I guess, deal with the smell and basically, have you guys have some kind of bypass overflow. But dealing with farm lands in terms of their overflow of raw sewage from the animals and pesticides and things of that nature. How are y'all are dealing with that, and what is the time frame to bring that online?
Unfortunately, from a city standpoint, the city can only worry about what's going on with the overflows coming in the sewers. We'll say that on an industry-wide basis, the concern from farmland and agricultural runoff and the fact that cities are doing a great job now cleaning up their waste and making sure it's contained and producing normally very good quality effluent. Since that's being taken care of and over the last 30 years or so has really made great strides, the next thing in the industry is looking at farmland, but right now it is being looked at, it is starting to be regulated, but it's not something I don't think the city has jurisdiction over itself. So.
Do you also get complaints directly to
The water supply itself, not the sewer itself. Is that what you're asking?
the water?
Water itself.
I turn the hydrant on that.
I haven't personally as the engineer assisting the city, but I mean that's something you have to ask Public Works stuff. But that is something. One of the things about the well water here is it's high. It has high salinity. It is well water. There's a tendency for other constituents to be there that aren't affecting human health per se, but as you noticed, maybe potentially smell. Switching over to surface water, potable water should be a much higher quality water itself. So that's something I think going back even further than what I presented here, but kind of the background of it is that one of the benefits of this conversion, one of the things we address with the regional board with this conversion to a higher quality potable water is that not only are we helping at the wastewater treatment plant in compliance, but we're actually giving the residents a benefit of a higher quality water. And there's the recognition. We could spend a lot of money at the treatment plant, at the wastewater treatment plant, and try to fix the salinity problem there. A lot of money could go into that. But instead, why don't we spend potentially that same amount of money, potentially less money on the surface water alternative, and we're solving two problems in some ways.
Further questions? Ken?
I'd just like to make a comment.
Most of you know me anyway. I'm Kent Madenwald, 612 Waxwing Lane in Newman. When I first moved to Newman, we were dealing with this wastewater problem, water problems, and the city went around and round and round. And now they've taken on Ecologic, which in my estimation has done an admirable job, a very good job, a very honest job, and are giving you exactly what you need to know and the results that you need to have at reasonable costs without any high expenditure. So I think the council has done an excellent job on maintaining and keeping the work with the Ecologic people.
Thank you, Ken.
We did something right.
Further questions? First in a long time, huh, Ken? Tiffany, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And rolling right into our next item, approval of sanitary sewer management plan and schedule.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Again, just to reiterate Tiffany's explanation, this SSMP management plan and schedule, it just assesses the current sewer system management, our operation, and our maintenance procedures, and it's to produce a complete sewer system management plan to comply with this new state regulations. One of the requirements, as she stated, is for state certification of the plan to be approved by the Newman City Council at a public meeting. So staff recommendation is that you approve the sanitary sewer management plan and schedule for the city of Newman.
If there's no questions for Ernie or direction?
I move for approval, Mr. Mayor.
Do we have a second?
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Guys, wake up. Thank you very much. Item F, adopt resolution number 2007, next to number, declaring certain personal property, surplus property, and authorizing disposal or sale of property.
Thank you, Mayor. As a city property becomes obsolete and or no longer serviceable, we take the opportunity to surplus this, and we bring it to the council to surplus it. Then we submit that to propertyroom.com, who comes and picks up the property, sells the property, and then provides us with the revenues. It brings in a few $100s a year. So at this particular time, you have an attached list of property that has been deemed surplus by the city, and we are asking you to surplus that property and to grant the staff approval for its disposal.
Questions? Bids on any of this stuff? If not, a motion?
I move to approve resolution 2007 next to number, declaring certain personal property, surplus property, and authorizing disposal or sale of said property.
Second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Item G, review and direction on draft letter to County Board of Supervisors.
Thank you, Mayor. As you know, at our last meeting, there was an item placed on the agenda by one of our council members, and the discussion so ensued. Following that discussion, the council directed I, as your city manager and staff, to prepare a letter to the County Board of Supervisors, and at which time I have done and put that in your package. Today, I am only asking that you review that and give me direction if you want any modifications, changes, additions, deletions. It was kind of, I know that it was a difficult task for me to try to capture the tone and content that this council so desired, and I hope that I met your expectations. But with that, I'd like you again to review that. Let me know what you think, and if you want me to deliver that with changes, additions, or deletions, and by which method you would like me to deliver that.
Questions or comments on the letter that Michael wrote?
If you'd like, Mayor, I could read it. Yeah, sure. We don't have it scanned in at this point. This letter is directed to the Stanislaus County Board of Supervisors regarding the Crows Landing Air Base reuse plan. Dear Supervisors, in February 2007, the City of Newman sent the Board of Supervisors a letter outlining concerns the city believes the board should consider when making decisions regarding the redevelopment of the Crows Landing Air Base site. While the board chose to disregard the concerns of the residents of West Stanislaus County with its February 2007 vote, the city will remain vigilant as the board moves forward. In an effort to re-emphasize our position, the city has elected to state our concerns with the current project. Concern number one. While a final development plan has yet to be reviewed by the board, the city believes it is imperative that the project fully mitigate all impacts associated with this development. It is extremely important that this project have a positive influence on West Stanislaus County communities and residents. Number two, aesthetics are important to the residents of our community. In particular, the City of Newman has invested a significant amount of capital into improving our downtown streetscape and developing plans for our downtown plaza. The city is concerned that a rail yard will have a negative impact upon the area and deter future investment in our community. The city will not support a plan that transforms West Stanislaus County into a rail yard with stockpiles of graffiti-laden storage containers and rail cars. 3. The city strongly opposes a project that expands beyond the existing limits of the airbase property. The proposed project is 4 times larger than our existing city limits and over 30% larger than our sphere of influence. While the city understands the need to plan for the future, the current proposal is inconsistent with size and scale of communities in West Stanislaus County. Number 4, whilst not specifically identified in the initial proposal, the city steadfastly opposes a project that contains a residential component now or in the future. In 2004, over 62% of the Newman electorate voted to advise the board to direct urban growth into the incorporated areas. This vote should also be considered as opposition to expanding the proposal beyond the footprint of the existing airbase. In closing, the City of Newman remains unconvinced the board will protect the values and quality of life of West Stanislaus County residents and communities during the redevelopment of the Crows Landing Air Base. Previous board decisions and the failure of the master developer to engage local leadership and incorporate them into the development process reinforces the belief that this project is based more upon politics than job development and sound planning. While the city cannot endorse the current direction of the project, we remain hopeful the board will not blindly endorse a plan without considering the West Stanislaus County residents and community. It is not too late to show the residents of West Stanislaus County that you hear their concerns and promise to respect and protect their values and way of life. Sincerely, John Fantasia, Robert Martinez, Michael Crinclaw, Ed Caton, and Ted Keller.
Comments from the council? I know we have some people here this evening that I think want to make some comments.
I think you did an excellent job of capturing what we wanted to say.
I would concur with that statement, too. I think it's exactly what we need to put out there, so we're not misunderstood.
Ed?
I would also concur. I think the letter's well written, and I think it states our position. And I just, for the record, it's interesting that since our last meeting, it's been the first time that I've been contacted by that developer requesting meetings with me and now wanting my attention to, I guess, share their information with me. And I just thought that it was interesting that prior to that point, I don't think this council or this city has ever really been approached and kind of given a position, although our supervisor has done a good job of regularly advising us of the status of that project. And I've tried to pay close attention to it as I've read articles in the paper and so forth and so on. So with that, it hasn't changed my position, and I agree with Michael. I think it was a well-written letter, and I would support being sent.
The only thing that I request before it's sent is we'll have to wait to the next council meeting till we have a full council, rather than just 4 councilmen here.
That'll work.
So I can reschedule this for direction on at the next meeting?
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable passing it without all council present.
Okay.
And well, Michael, when Mr. Kelly returns, you might be able to contact him, just have him.
He's back now.
Okay.
He got back late tonight, so if
have a chance to brief it and then have it prepared for signature at our next meeting. I would agree.
Also, and then the matter of delivery. If you want me to mail this, if you mail it, then each member of the board of supervisor gets it, or if you direct me to go to a board of supervisor meeting and read it into the record, that's your two options that I would provide to you.
I'd like to have it read into the minutes of the meeting.
We can discuss that at our next meeting when we have a full council.
See what the full council wants to do, yeah. Comments from the public on this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Mike Lynch. I live in Turlock. I'm a private consultant. Where I operate out of Modesto. I have a contract with California Strategies, and my assignment with California Strategies is to work with West Park. And I'm doing a lot of the public outreach. So, Councilman Caton, I apologize. if we've missed you in that engagement process. I have a couple comments I'd like to make on your letter. And first, let me just tell you that I'm a little bit familiar with this project. I was Assemblyman Condit's and then Congressman Condit's chief of staff for 15 years, and I helped draft the legislation that transferred the base to the county. And we did that to provide an economic engine for Stanislaus, because we all know the social indicators that show where we rate compared to, by we mean in the largest in the San Joaquin Valley and Stanislaus, compared to the other parts of California and other parts of the country. And we got the bill through after a 5-year struggle, and we got it through the way we wanted, where they transferred it at no cost to the county, and with the provision that the federal government would be responsible for all the cleanup. And they've done all that except for about 170 acres, which they're doing now. After Congressman Condit left office, I went to work for the Great Valley Center in Carroll Whiteside. And that is where I met Mr. Camillus, because he was a speaker at one of our conferences. And in May, I opened up my private consulting company. I have 5 or 6 contracts, and this is the major one. So I just wanted to identify where I was coming from on this. I've reviewed your letter. We don't disagree with point number 1. We think the developer should mitigate impacts. We don't disagree with point number 2 in the sense that aesthetic concerns are crucial and essential and should always be considered and mandated. Number 3 is an issue that has been discussed at great length, and that's the size factor. The 4,800 acre West Park proposal was designed to secure economies of scale so we could provide the jobs and make the thing work. Number 4, on residential housing, we agree. There is no housing in this proposal, none. Mr. Camillus actually made a proposal to the ad hoc committee, Supervisor DiMartini was present, that they could write into the development agreement, write into it any prohibition they wanted to secure that desire of no housing. So, there's not going to be any houses from West Park. Even if they wanted to, they couldn't, because the Board of Supervisors has said no. And I think, frankly, that as of February's election in Stanislaus County, even if the Board of Supervisors and West Park and everyone else wanted to, they couldn't because of the vote on the sprawl initiative. So I think that, frankly, the housing issue is a red herring. My only criticism, or major criticism of this letter, would be the part that I would be responsible for, which would be the public outreach part. And I apologize if we've been remiss in not fully engaging Newman in this. We have had all kinds of public outreach effort. We've done 2 mailings of over 10,000 households to the west side specifically, including all of Newman. We've done 1 mailing to the whole county, inviting people to our public hearings. We've had over 13 hearings, 8 of which on the west side. Those are the sponsored hearings from West Park. We've had numerous meetings with different groups, like the Newman Rotary, et cetera, et cetera. We've had all kinds of meetings with city and county officials, as Jim can attest to. We meet regularly with county staff and ad hoc committee, which includes representatives from, at times from Patterson, I believe even at times from Newman. We've established an email list where we try to send all these documents out to everybody, and I know you guys are all on it, and we may not be sending it to the right number, and it may be getting spammed out or something to keep everyone current. We've submitted, and the county has published on their website for this, the extensive technical reports that we've done in a whole variety of technical fields. In fact, we're starting a series of meetings now with the county for reaction to those reports, and we have to now meet with all the different communities to get their input into them and their concerns and all those things addressed. And we've got a meeting scheduled, I know, with the Port of Water District, with the Crow's Landing Community Services District. I think Mike, I think you're coming on the meeting we have with Patterson. But we are, willing to meet people and engage people in any capacity. And I want to apologize if we've been remiss in doing that with Newman. And we can schedule any public meeting you want. We can schedule any staff technical meeting you want. We are willing to do that at your behest. If you want a council presentation of where we are, we'll give it to you. You tell us the time and we'll be there. So I want you to know that if we made that error, we do apologize for it. This has been probably the most transparent project I've ever seen, let alone been associated with. This is just the starting point. You know, we've gone through 2 quarters of this. As Supervisor DeMartini said last week, or 2 weeks ago, we've met every threshold that the county developed in this process. We've tagged, made every checkpoint, and there's another one coming up at the end of December, and we think we'll make all of those checkpoints. And when we meet all the checkpoints in April and answer all the questions, then the Board of Supervisors gets all the information and has to make a decision on whether there's a go-ahead to it. And I want to invite you from the West Park perspective. You're a full partner in this. You want any information that we can get you that we haven't, tell me, we'll get it to you. Any questions that you want, I will try to get you answers. I can't guarantee you like all the answers, but I'll get you the answer. And so I want to first just say, if we've left the impression that we didn't engage you or that we weren't engaged, that's an erroneous impression, and we've been remiss in communicating that with you, and I'll do my best, we all will, to make sure that doesn't happen again. So with that, you know, we have Leroy McDonald is, you know, actually recently joined us, and he, as you know, we think the commuter issue is very important. And he's a new resident of Newman, and he's going to be doing some work for us. Maybe, Leroy, you'd like to say a few words and let some other people talk. So, unless you have questions, Mayor, or members of the council, of me.
Any questions for Mike? Thank you, Mike.
Mayor and City Council members, good evening. I'm Leroy McDonald. I'm a resident here of Newman. Been here about a year and a half now. Love Newman. I'm growing to really appreciate living in the Valley. But I grew up in San Francisco, left the city of Oakland just before I basically had former Congressman Ron Dellums to be elected the mayor of Oakland. I was on the steering committee prior to coming here. But when I got here to Newman, let me say this very quickly, is that I seen Newman as a potential to basically help the city to grow with the experience that me and my wife have worked almost 30 years in the industry of development and construction management. And I said that to say this, is that when we learned of the the Crow's Landing project, we thought this would be a great opportunity to help this project move along, but not only that, to bring in a complete impact to the west side of this valley. The 37,000 jobs that basically are potential for this project could be a great impact for the west side. And not only that, the blight that we're seeing right now in this valley, especially starting from Patterson, that's flowing over into the Newman area in terms of foreclosures, people not affording to stay with their homes because they have to leave them to go 30, 40 miles to work, is incredible. I think this is an opportunity right now at the right time for this project to take place. If any one of you basically have a heart and realize what's happening to these people that are flowing into these new homes, that basically they cannot find a job here, you would have a heart to say, well, this is the time for us to start thinking about the people. If you are our voice, and the city council is supposed to be our voice, you should think of the people in terms of these 37,000 jobs. Whether we get them all placed, I think the opportunity is right now for this to happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know,
David?
Mr. McDonald, before you leave, everybody has perspective, and I appreciate yours being here for a year, but some have been here for a long time, and ours is a little different than yours.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Dave Reed, 1541 Kern Street. What everyone's been saying tonight is kind of getting away from this letter thing. It's you know, we've already made the letter up. And as far as the current prospective developer being available, I know many of us have tried to get into his meetings, like the one that was here in Newman and I believe one in Custody, whatever, anyway. And we were told that it was full. It was 40 people or whatever, and it was full. When in actuality, there were 20 people or less at the meetings. So away from that, I've been on the, I was on the steering committee for this Crow's Landing base for about 5 years. And we went through various things, and at no time was it ever mentioned going over about 1,500 acres. There's few little infills in the area besides what was available at the base, but not much. And a rail siding was mentioned and things like that. But the whole thing is we're getting to something that's 4 times that size, 3 times that size. And we, you know, why do we need that? It's, and again, we're talking 37,000 jobs. Where are these people going to live? They're going to live in Newman, because we don't have the capacity, and Patterson is not going to have the capacity either, I don't think. Frankly, I just think that I think your letter was fine. I think that this is what we ought to stand for, and as far as the some of these other things, I think I'd rather take my chances with the Nigerian lottery on that. So, thank you.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I keep on winning that lottery too. Further public comment? No one else?
Good evening, Mayor and Council and citizens. My name is Larry Bedford. I am co-owner of Mr. B's Main Street Bakery here in Newman. I've heard a little bit about this project, enough to know that, and let me say that I've spent 32 years in industry. The last 21 years was at the Hanford nuclear site, 580-acre site, 177 1-million-gallon tanks of nuclear waste. And I know that I'll look at this project and the idea that the government has turned this land back over to the county. They've got a vested interest in seeing something happen on that site. And I think that we as a city need to make sure that we are actively involved in whatever happens there. A couple things. One, the mention of 37,000 jobs. Just since I've been here and in business, I've seen enough places empty in this city, and certainly in Patterson, that we can accommodate some of those individuals. And I'll go one step further. Of my years in industry, we spent a lot of time in various capacities, human resources, operations management, and my last 13 years in technical training. Spent a lot of years recruiting. And one of the main issues that we had as a company was retention. I look out, I don't know what the size of the high school is, the graduating class for this year. Many people that I've seen since I've been here are people that have parents that lived here. They moved away for jobs and then have come back to either take up their parents' residence or finally made enough money that they were able to come back. And so I think that if we look at the idea of just the people that are from this area possibly having some jobs in that area or at that site, that's one of the ways which would be good for the community as far as retention of our current citizens and their offspring. So I think that we as a city need to make sure that we are actively involved in this. I listened closely to the 5 items that were addressed in the letter, and I think that it sounds like the letter is designed to get the board's attention and make sure that Newman is involved. Not necessarily that you're saying that you don't want to be involved. You're just not agreeing with the direction. Am I correct, Mike?
Yeah, this letter, that's correct. That's correct.
Okay. So we do expect the city to be involved in this project.
The city will remain vigilant on this project, yes.
I'd just like to say as a citizen that if there's anything that I can do to assist in that, I'd be willing to contribute anything that I can to make sure that at least there's a voice heard from Newman with regards to this, because I fully believe that the project will fly, and it'd be a shame for us to be left behind on it. So, thanks.
Thank you, Larry. Further comments?
Good evening, Richard Gaten, 733 Bath. I believe we should have some more public hearings in the city of Newman, because I've been so much involved with the youth program here in the city of Newman, and I don't have the time to come where they plan out these meetings and all this stuff. And some of the things that I've heard in the past, I've been here, I'm original Baptist, Mr. Kendall. I've been here over 15 years, and I've grown with the city. And it's part of me now. I enjoy the city. I enjoy the people. I was a little hesitant at first being settled here. But as time grows on, it sort of grows on you. And I came from a big community to a small community. I got involved with the community and the people. And since I've been here, Crow's Landing hasn't really developed. And the main things I've heard since our community members is that they have to travel so far to get jobs. My main concern is if we can get a job locally, it'd be great. But the wages don't meet what we have here. And if you go to the housing today, for instance, we see these foreclosures because of these high interest rates. Well, that killed us because the demand for wages weren't here. They was all across from coming over from the Bay Area, and it kind of killed us. I look at it as that, you know, we're kind of need, if this project was approved by the Board of Supervisors, there had to be a reason. I mean, there's a lot of pros and cons with this rail situation. I've worked in the Bay Area. I've seen what a rail situation is. You're going to get graffiti everywhere you go. So you have to learn to deal with that. I don't per se has seen congestion of traffic, as we talked in the past in our city plan, which I was involved in a couple of years ago, and I haven't seen it. The city plan was 10 years ago. The congestion hasn't grown as much. We do have some. I see all our neighbors are growing, and I kind of feel we're sort of a little behind, and we need to catch up in technology. If there's something hopeful for the city, I recommend the city hold off on this letter and have a little bit more public hearing so we can all be behind you. We just want to get some more little information. This is going to be on the table for a while. I can see that. And like I said, as a concerned citizen, I want more info. I'm concerned on the job growth. I'm concerned about the future for our kids. Maybe some don't want to leave this place. If we have new technology with the space, it'd be fine. People could stay here and grow with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Further comments?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Chris McDonald, and my husband and I, as he stated earlier, we moved here about a year ago. I support this project, and I would really like to see the council, the city of Newman, give this project, give West Park an opportunity to prove themselves in this project. And I really would like to see more of us that came out to support to share with the city council, your feelings in regards to supporting this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments?
Mayor, if I could just mention one quick thing. If our offer to have a formal presentation here, if that's your desire, I can call Mike tomorrow and get a date, or any way you want to do that, we will do it. So if you can give me some direction on how to do the follow-up on that, I'll be more than happy to do that, so that we can have the hearings and have an opportunity to explain the whole project and do all those kinds of things that are part of the decision-making process.
Thank you for that offer.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Willie Jackson. I'm a resident here. I've been out here about a year and a half, I guess. And I'm in transportation myself, and have been for about 40 years. And the way the industry is going, we need to do something to alleviate some of the traffic and some of the smog and stuff like that. And the proposals that has been, from what I understand, would do just that. Create a lot of jobs, take a lot of the big trucks, and I'm in trucking, but it would take a lot of the big trucks off of the road and stuff like that. If you notice the accident that's been in the last month, I guess, these are the new drivers, inexperienced. We're going to have a lot of that. A lot of the guys that are retiring, the old heads are retiring. So we need another system. Now, I wouldn't try to put my own self down. I'm in business myself. But I think any time that industry or anybody else puts the dollar before human value, then they got the values in the wrong place. If you weigh the thing, well, money is a necessity. We need it to live. But when it comes to using it to kind of keep a certain area down, keep certain people down, certain areas from developing, I think that's wrong. But I mean, life itself, I mean, we're supposed to be able to enjoy life. And I commute every morning. I go about 50, I think it's 53 miles, 53, 54 miles every day. That's 108 miles a day. I don't like that commute. So my interest is, now I'm 67 years old, so I'm going to be going a whole lot, but I got kids, I got grandkids and stuff like that, and some of the others in the house. And it would just be a good way to kind of help the young people out that's coming before us. We got, hopefully, unless Jesus come, you know, and he can do that anytime. But we kind of have to look out for them. And if you don't get them going in the right direction, then two wrongs never make no one right. I don't care how you start it. It'll still come out wrong. Two wrongs will never make one right. So I don't know what's needed other than some input from you all to kind of help to look it over, because you know, if you got your support, it makes everybody else's job a little bit easier. And none of our lives are guaranteed to wake up in the morning. So, you know, the more that you can put an input into what's trying to be done, I think the better it will be for your kids, your grandkids, mine, everybody here. And I'll be the dispatcher.
Thank you.
I'm Kent Madenwald again. I would just like to address the gentleman here as to why the programs that are presented are limited to 40 people. I tried to call and last time and they said, oh no, we're loaded. And less than 20 people were there. Why aren't these open?
I'll tell you what.
And I mean, if they're afraid of too many people being against them, they've got a problem.
I actually was concerned about that when that concept first came up. They decided to do that for the purpose of having a discussion where people could have a big exchange of ideas and share information. And people called up and RSVP'd, and if the maximum number was exceeded, they were told, we're going to have another one on a certain date, or give us your name, we'll call you back and we'll redo it. I believe they rescheduled it with everybody. We had individual ones with those who couldn't do it, but we had 2 extra meetings, and I believe I was told that everyone who had not been set into one meeting was either in another, or so I apologize for that, but you know, we.
I don't know why it isn't open.
Well, I just said that the reason they did that.
But you're controlling it. If you've got 40 people, you can control what everybody's going to say. You open it up, you're gonna get a wide variety.
Well, you know what? If we can have a wide open meeting here whenever you want. Okay? And actually, the meetings worked really good. I was worried about the same thing you are, but I thought they worked very well. And all of the meeting minutes, by the way, are on our website for all the meetings throughout the county. They're all there for people to look at. We've put everyone who attended the meetings, have been getting all of our emails, and all of our mailers. So it's been pretty inclusive. I think it's been the most inclusive effort I've ever seen. I'd like to say one more thing, Mayor, on behalf of the county. If we've been remiss in engaging Newman, it's not the county's fault. They have been hammering us from the day this started to be inclusive and involve everyone on the west side. So, that's not the county's. The county has been saying that ought to happen. So I just want to stand up for the county on that. And we will do the open meeting and whatever you want. Okay.
So you would be best.
Paul Wallace, 2025 N Street. And I actually did go to the meeting and came away being very happy that Supervisor DeMartini's keeping these developers' feet to the fire and that you guys are doing the same thing. They weren't prepared. They didn't know what school district they were in. This was the week after Senator Denham had sponsored a legislation that says you can put your kid in a school district where you work. 37,000 jobs, dropping their kids on Bonita, and these guys didn't know what school district they're in. I assume it's Bonita. I don't know. Maybe it's Patterson.
No, it's Crow's Landing.
Newman, Crow's Landing. So, we just had our general plan held up because we weren't, responsive enough to keeping track of what our school district needs. That's the gentleman talked about the gang problems that they're having in Patterson and whatnot, and I went to the meeting. These guys didn't know what school district they were in. They're this far in. We're applying for state grant money, and then that was the other side. But they don't have a partner on this railroad thing. They've got all these numbers. The trains are going to be this size, and personally, I think it's a great idea. The idea that, our asthmatic kids out here breathe this cesspool that's the air we call out here from all these trucks driving over the hill. We need a different solution. But these guys don't have a team member there. Well, apparently Burlington isn't interested in it. Apparently, I don't know who's going to do it, but there's nobody there saying, we run trains and this is going to work. They've got numbers, the trains are going to be this long, but nobody's saying, yeah, we run trains like that and it's going to work. So that really upset me that maybe their homework wasn't done and maybe they're as far along as they seem in some of this stuff. And really, we're 4 or 5 years out from first shovel hitting the dirt, but I was concerned, and I'm glad you guys are holding their feet to the fire. I'm glad you guys are looking at the size of this project. We're holding a lot of industrial land in reserve in Newman, ready for somebody to come build a project, but none of us want to see what happened when Leprino went out of our town either. And so I'm glad you guys are holding their feet to their fire on the size and making sure that that the devil's in the details, because the details are going to bite us when it comes back and, only 1,300 jobs showed up. We have all this land. We got to build houses on it or something like that. So appreciate it. I think you guys are headed in the right track.
Thank you, Paul. Further comments? No? Further comments from the council?
Yes, I'd like to make a comment. Most of the people that have been on the west side for any length of time have followed Crow's Landing, and they, of course, recognized the importance of that base there. And we were just chomping at the bit because we knew that it would bring jobs to this area. So don't misunderstand the council's position. Our position is we went down the wrong road. They chose the wrong developer. And that's the position that we take now, and that's the reason we've sent the letter. And people have to know that. We've never been opposed to Crow's Landing being developed. We just want it developed like the west side wants it developed. We don't want somebody to come in here and tell us how it should be done. We want to have a part of that and tell them what we want done there. And we didn't get that. And that's my comment.
Further comments? If not, we'll move on to item H, report from Supervisor DeMartini.
Good evening, Mayor Fantasia, council members. I'm not going to say much about the airbase tonight, so we'll wait for your letter. I think it's appropriate that Newman expresses their concerns. I know Patterson is about to do it too. And your concerns should be expressed to the board, because hopefully this letter will go farther than the last one you sent, which was completely ignored. And I believe this one won't be. I know Patterson has talked to me a little bit about it, and their concerns are similar, but they are concerned about their water supply, pumping from the aquifer, and trains going through the center of town, and truck traffic. Were probably different issues that they have, but you're a different city, so you have different issues. But I look forward to your letter. I had a kind of a less glamorous thing I was going to talk to you about tonight, was the rebuilding of our animal shelter. And although it's probably not the sexiest thing to talk about, the county is in the process now of doing a needs assessment and architectural design to rebuild its animal shelter. The shelter was built in 1970, and it is overcrowded and outdated at this time. The reason I bring it up tonight is that Newman is one of the contract cities for animal control, since we take care of your animal control under contract. And we were probably looking at probably spending somewhere in around $10 million on rebuilding this facility, keeping what we can of the existing facility, and then building the other one. We will be asking the cities to contribute something to the building, depending upon what your percentage of your animals that come from here into there. The good part is the city of Newman's figures that I received yesterday were at 1.3%. So your cost is going to be fairly small on this. But the facility is approaching 40 years old now, and you're going to be hearing more about this in the future, because we're going to have to rebuild this thing. Hopefully, the city of Newman will continue with the county and the animal control. And as we developed our needs assessment and master plan, probably sometime around the first of the year, I'll be able to give you a lot better picture of just what it is we're going to do. But at the present time, the county has spent about $220,000 on consultants and architectural concepts, and we should have something from the engineering firm that is working on this probably after the first of the year.
Our share's probably about $100 in or something like that, hopefully.
Well, I didn't calculate it out, but it's 1.3% of about $10 million is what our estimate is, but that's not a cash deal, let's say. We use debt financing to finance our buildings, and it would be something over a very long term. It adds up. It's just, City of Modesto is 41%. To show you how much their bill will be. Stanislaus County has 38.5%. So at 1.3%, you'll be pretty minimal. But as you know, all public facilities do wear out, and from time to time they have to be rebuilt. And our ventilation system in the building is inadequate now. The air where the animals are housed is the same air that the staff breathes in their offices. That's no longer done, so they're just to update and rebuild, and to make the shelter something that is modern and large enough. It's terribly overcrowded too. It's probably somewhere in the range of approaching 200% of capacity right now. So we do have a problem. County recognizes it, and we are working on it. Of other interest, the West Side Healthcare Task Force which Councilman Kelly is on. We've rescheduled that meeting. We had a conflict with county staff on that, and we have just moved it back 1 week only to November 8th. I think it was originally scheduled for either the 1st or 2nd.
It was
will be in
first,
Paris.
yeah.
Was
I
it
got
the
an
first?
email that, yeah, it was moved
Yeah,
one week later to the 8th, yeah, Thursday the 8th.
Yeah, and that wasn't, my doing, but it was our staff and county council and Keith Boggs had a conflict. We will have a nice presentation. We have gathered more information on what the medical facilities are on the west side, and we've come a long ways. Each meeting we learn more information, and we are, it's a slow process, but it's a gradual one, but it's steady. And we'll be able, I think, in a year's time to come up with something pretty good. I just wanted to make you aware that that meeting will be on the 8th rather than the 1st. And I think that's probably about all I have tonight. Unless you have some questions about the air base, I wasn't going to make any comment about it tonight. And that was all.
Jim, question on your animal control. Not long ago, they passed an ordinance to neuter and spayed dogs, neuter and spayed dogs. Has that helped decrease
Yes, it
that
has.
number?
It has in a couple of ways. The animals coming into the shelter have been reduced. We are charging a higher fee for unaltered animals, and that extra money, because some people just don't want to alter their animals, and that extra money that we're getting goes into a spay-neuter program where we do a voucher program. The vouchers cost around $50. It's called the SCAPE program. And so we use we're using general fund money, but we're also using the money from the licenses, the increase in the licenses, to provide spaying and neutering. And no animal is released from the shelter unless it's spayed and neutered. But the animal ordinance was a very difficult thing to get through the board. We all had different ideas, and it was one of the more miserable things I've worked on there, but we did finally hammer it out, and it is working. I mean, it's not perfect, but still at this point, there hasn't been anything in the animal ordinance that's not working that needs to be changed. And we're willing to always go back and look at anything that we've done and make changes if there's some unforeseen circumstances or something didn't work out right the way we expected, but it is working. The key to this is to reduce the pet overpopulation. And the only way you're going to be able to do it is spaying and neutering. We are at a disadvantage in Stanislaus County is that we do not have a nonprofit like SPCA animal shelter. The county operation is about the only game in town. And so we have limited facilities where we can put animals up for adoption. Because of our overcrowding, we're euthanizing about 80 animals a day that are adoptable type animals. And so with the larger facility, we hope to increase our adoptions. So we have many facets to it. But my allergies bother me tonight. But in answer to your question, it is working. It is helping, but we still have a terrible overcrowding problem. And the shelter was built when the county probably had about 250,000 people in the county. Now we're 500,000, so we have a lot more animals too in the same size shelter. Okay.
Supervisor, as always, thank you for attending our meetings. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Item 11, items from city manager and staff.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one point of clarification again on item 10G for the general public is I don't believe this council is not opposed to the Crow's Landing Air Base. People need to understand that. They're opposed to a 4,800 acre project that would be 30% larger than the build out of our general plan, and it's 4.5 times larger than our existing city. So when they talk about air pollution and reducing all that, you're not reducing it, you're relocating it. You're relocating it to our area. Those trucks don't go away, they just come to our area. So we're here just to make sure that the residents of Newman have a project 6 miles away that they can live with. That's what this council's trying to do. So we're not here to opposing jobs. That's not what's happening. So, and I know Mr. Lynch talked about how he was kind of opposed to the word engage in the letter. This group has engaged the cities of Turlock and Modesto, but have not engaged the city of Newman. So that kind of tells you we're not going to sit by and let this project happen without the city of Newman having its say. So with that, I will go into my report. The Joint Fire Protection Study is underway. On October 30th, staff is scheduled to meet with Citygate in Patterson. We will be meeting with them at 10 in the morning. There are slots for council members. I know Councilmember Crinclaw and Councilmember Kelly have expressed interest in meeting. I think they're scheduled for 3 o'clock at Patterson City Hall. If other council members would like to participate in that, that is available to you as well. So just please contact Mike Meyer and he'll take care of that for you. I know at the last council meeting, Mayor Pro Tem Martina has asked about a coming soon sign. That is coming soon. And that'll be at the Hill property, identifying the proposed location.
You mean I can put my trunks on?
Yes. The proposed location of the Newman Aquatic Center. On your agendas, and our deputy city clerk, Mr. Meyer, here does an excellent job. We have our aquatic design team that's coming back and meeting in beginning of November to discuss that. Even further, we're getting into architectural details now and getting into schematic design. So hopefully by the end of this calendar year, January of '08, you're really going to be looking at a product here that's pretty finished and ready to go to construction documents. I don't know if you noticed, I think Ernie might be showing you some pictures of Driscoll and Hills Ferry Road. I hope you have taken a look at that. I've had a meeting with Alliance as of recently, and preliminarily we've kind of scheduled the first quarter of 2008 as the opportunity that the city will be submitting an application to bring the enterprise zone to Newman and its areas within our sphere of influence. So I'll be bringing that back to you probably in November and December and just kind of educating you on the process so we understand what the enterprise zone, what it means to Newman, and what it means to job growth and existing businesses here. So we'll start the educational process probably throughout the rest of this year, and then the first calendar year of 2008 make that application. At the last meeting, there was, again, discussion about StanCog and votes that happened at StanCog. I know Councilmember Crinclaw had asked about the rail bond money and a vote that's going to transpire. That vote is scheduled to take place on November 14th. You have a meeting on November 13th. So with direction that you gave me at the previous council meeting, I will be scheduling something on November 13th meeting for that. And also the city managers meet on November 1st to discuss that item. So on November 14th, Patterson and the city of Newman will be getting together a second time to discuss surface water treatment plant. And again, just back of the envelope type numbers to see if it makes sense for us to try to work together and do a joint project, a regional project with that. So with that, I don't have any other things to report, other than there will be no riveting report tonight as our police chief has taken his rifle for a walk in Colorado. And one last thing, we do have a chamber mixer at 6 p.m. at G Bar Inn this coming Wednesday.
Tomorrow night.
Yeah, lastly. And one last thing.
Tomorrow night.
Wednesday night.
6 o'clock.
Wednesday night. And then we also we had the presentation on the rate studies will probably be, this is a pretty elaborate process to go through a Prop 218 vote. So we've requested a quote for services from NBS, who does our landscape and lighting districts, and they'll be providing a quote to us. We probably anticipate it's going to be about $7,000 to $10,000 to go through that process. So. But we'll bring that back before you, hopefully at your next meeting.
Thank you,
all
Michael.
I had. And the council has any questions?
Questions from Michael? Other staff reports?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. I just wanted to let you know that youth soccer ends this Saturday. Youth basketball registrations continue until Friday, and then late registrations then continue on until November 9th. And our Mommy and Me class still has plenty of openings, and we will be taking our first field trip of the year to the Pumpkin Patch in Patterson next Tuesday in costume.
Wow.
Any questions?
You said soccer ends when?
This Saturday.
You're kidding.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Said he's kidding. You said you're kidding. You're sad or what?
I think it just should be starting. I mean, this should be. We should have a longer season.
It's been 8 weeks, trust me. 8 long weeks.
8 long weeks.
Terry's been there every day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Want to keep the program going? You're volunteering?
I'll do it. I'll do it.
Yeah.
As the city manager pointed out, I do have some pictures to show you. For the last couple of weeks, Public Works Department has been busy refurbishing the landscape along this is Hills Ferry Road. And the plants are rather small. They're only 5-gallon plants, but we planted purple flax and some of those raffia shrubs along this area. Next picture. And again, they continue. You can see them a lot better along here as you go over into the entrance into the Driscoll area. Around in here in this area, we're able to put in some ground cover, some vinca plants, ground cover. Those will be little blue flowers that will blossom up. And these are only 1-gallon plants. And we've also got some of that society garlic, which is the smaller. You can see the little flowers down in there, down below. And of course, in the back along the wall, we put in additional flax and raffia shrubs. So those are just some of the pictures. The next couple of pictures will show these guys busy. They were taken this morning. They've gotten almost over to red teal and wood duck, and by the end of the week we should have that entire area completely planted. We will have planted over 1,000 plants, so that's looking pretty nice. And then fortunately we'll continue on down Driscoll and fill in and add additional plants along in that area. But we got to start getting ready for the Christmas season, so we're going to pull off of that and start doing all our Christmas lights and decorations. And then in the spring, we'll continue with our refurbishment efforts along Upper Road and other areas. Any questions?
Just one quick question, Ernie.
Sure.
I know you did because the sprinkler system is working now.
Oh yes, they are. We went through them all. We had we replaced some of the control boxes also on there because they were pretty much worn. And
that's great.
So
I'd hate to see you lose
looking
1,000 plants.
Oh no, we're not going to, believe you me.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And then a couple of other things. One thing that I had mentioned before, and Michael forgot to mention, is that we met with Boyle Engineering, Bob Stoddard. And we went over the administrative draft for our stormwater master plan. We met with Bob Stoddard and his associates yesterday. Give them all our comments, and so they're going to be making all the corrections, and so should have a final pretty quick. And also the county has moved up the overlay project schedule. We've moved it up to the end of the month. On Monday, October the 29th, we're going to be in to do the wedge cutting on along Driscoll and L Street. And then the overlay is going to take place, we're going to overlay Driscoll on Tuesday, October the 30th, and then we're going to complete with L Street on Wednesday the 31st. Any questions? That's all I have.
Very good.
Thank you, Ernie. Other staff reports? No? Items from city council members. Ed?
I'll just make a couple comments. It was interesting, after we as the council and the county has, throughout Stanislaus County has adopted the ordinances regarding scrap metal dealers. It was a topic of conversation in my office in Merced last week with the sheriff and undersheriff, and I heard them, so I chimed in that we had passed, and I know that they're attempting to, because they alluded to the fact that Stanislaus County and San Joaquin County has aggressively adopted those resolutions and policy or procedures and ordinances. And so, but they're struggling with some of the language, and I suggested that maybe their legal counsel get a hold of county or Stanislaus County legal counsel, because they're trying to come up with some language that will deal with it, but they're moving along with that. And also, it was interesting, after we had passed our residential assistance for our city employees, I noticed in the paper that the city of San Francisco has also taken that approach for their city employees, but they've included the school district or school teachers as well in theirs. But I think their home loan was only like $10,000, I believe. That's what I read. One last comment. One of our speakers, and no disrespect, Richard, Mr. Gayton, as far as learning to live and deal with graffiti, I think the city of Newman has done an excellent job over the years of dealing with it aggressively. And I think just because growth comes, that doesn't mean that we have to learn to live with graffiti. If you notice, our town, I think, is fairly graffiti-free, and our Public Works Department does a great job getting on it, as well as the police department when they see it. So I don't think that's something that we need to learn to live with and deal with, because I think we already deal with it aggressively. And when you talk about the blight and things like that, I think we as a city do a fine job of addressing those issues. So with that, I don't think that we're going to learn to live and deal with it. We already are, and we don't accept it.
Excuse me, I was referring to the rail cars.
And that as well. And if you notice, every rail car, I travel 99 every day, and I think to myself, it's amazing that every rail car, whether it be Union Pacific or BNSF, goes down the tracks. Every rail car is tagged, and it's amazing. And there were some that were parked on just off of 99 last week, brand new rail cars, brand new, and they were already tagged. So with respect to the project, and I think the comment was made that, you know, if rail cars are stored in our area, in along our tracks, it's a target, and it does add blight, and it's not nice to look at. So
2 minutes? 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm done. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Ed. Bob?
I'll save my comments for next meeting.
Thank you. Mike?
I have no comment this evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Bob was going to be happy back
Gave you
there.
3 minutes.
The only thing I wanted to remind everyone is the chamber mixer tomorrow night. It's a Halloween theme, I guess. Come dressed in costume. G-Bar Inn is hosting it. 6 o'clock.
Can I bring my dog?
No free services, Bob. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.